And then if we continue on, we come back and discuss, I believe it's page 5 of 6 is the next place we engage.
I think we were all good with.
Yeah, I think that was just clarification. Board shall continue. And then the employees are responsible. I think that language we dropped in multiple places
Yeah.
as well.
We were good with that clarification last time.
So that's our counter for Article 20.
Okay. So we talked about this as a team and we looked at the statute as well. And so based on the discussions of my team, our team, and on page 2, the first part of 20.1-8, we would like to strike through within school board policy and add within Florida statutes 1012.61, which is where this language lies in Florida statute. Because Florida statute trumps school board policy and our contract trumps school board policy. And so if we're referring to the statute really with this, because we still feel that it's not reflected in what we're trying to do here. And so we would like to strike through school board policy and add Florida statute, because that's where this is housed. And so right now, board policy goes above what even the statute says with limiting 5-day blocks and a donation. And so if we're going to reference anything here, we'd like to reference Florida statute 1012.61.
Linda?
The only point of clarification I guess I have is probably a legal one, because in order to have a sick leave donation, and maybe this is trumped by the CBA, but in order to have sick leave donation, statute does require school board policy. So,
Well, I think it can require, I mean, you do have to have a board policy, but your board policy can't contradict what's in our contract, and our contract can't contradict or go where the statute says.
mhm.
And so our team would feel more comfortable if we're referencing the Florida statute, knowing that the board policy does line up with Florida statute and within the parameters of our contract.
Mhm.
And so, but that means board policy needs to be updated.
Mhm.
And so we would feel more comfortable if we're referencing Florida statute here. And Florida statute does direct you all to have a board policy around sick leave donation, and that doesn't negate that.
Mhm.
But within our contract, we wanted it to be clear in reference Florida statute. And we also, one of the other things we talked about in our team and previously was the application and for the sick leave donation needs to be updated to reflect once we're done with this, it needs, board policy needs to be updated, and so does the application for sick leave donation. Clear about who can donate, how they can donate, what they can donate, etc. So that there's no confusion with that. So what are your thoughts on just citing Florida statute on that third one?
I'm not quite ready. And I want to seek to understand, because this is about the 200 hours, I believe.
And a few other things.
Mhm.
And as we get down to the minutia of the receiving employee, this still goes a little bit above what Florida statute actually outlines.
And I think my concern relative to why you continue to see the 200 hours back in is the fact that you can have a person that has exhausted their leave. I'll say myriads of people have donated leave, and they continue to be out and out and out and beyond a period of time that even one of our leaves would extend, per se. And so I begin to have a concern that period of time when we have extended beyond what would even be in a free leave that we're talking about. And so that has always been why I believe we need a guardrail and a backstop at the 200 hours.
Okay.
That Linda and I have discussed qualifying conditions or, kinds of things. So we could reevaluate and go again. We've worked through issues of pregnancy, those issues.
Mhm.
But the 200 hours for me is a concern for the amount of time as well. I hear what you're saying about statute. But at a point in time, there's an issue of student instruction and practicality that I need to put it in the room. That's why it's not arbitrary, no 200, no 200. It's because there are people that they could continue to receive and continue to receive. And then it could be used, you know?
Yeah. Well, 200 hours on the teacher work schedule on the 7.75 hour day, it's only almost 26 days.
Mhm.
And so if you are on an FMLA that's 12 weeks, I mean, that's 60 days. And so if somebody, if I wanted to take my full 12 weeks for my FMLA and my school wanted to donate money to me, why shouldn't I be able to get my FMLA's worth? You know, I'm already going to be out anyway. Why should I have to be financially harmed? And so we think if we're going to have a cap, 200 is too low. And because that doesn't do anything for somebody that is going out on an unpaid leave, like FMLA or medical. I mean, and actually, we're really talking about FMLA here because then they're still considered an active employee because of the way they're paid out and the board still contributes. And so that really doesn't give them a lot of breathing room unless they already have their own sick leave. But if they've already had, let's say, a complicated pregnancy, they may be out of sick leave, you know, ahead of that. And so, and really,
If that's just me, to put that in language.
and so, yeah. And so if you're concerned, and I hear that concern, and I don't necessarily, we don't not share that concern. I want to put that out there. But to the maximum time without contractual leaves, I mean, if they're already going to be out on a leave, then we're financially harming them if somebody else wants to give them leave and they're already approved for that leave. And I think that helps with your concern. And then, but also gives the employee flexibility to have income coming in from donated leave.
I was already going toward the maximum allowed because that's where we were.
Okay.
Um,
So I think that addresses what your concern is, but also have some more flexibility on the receiving employee.
Mhm.
think what I would like, I know we're early, but
Okay.
we know what we're doing and why we're here.
Okay,
I would like to pull my room aside and talk this
Okay.
real quick.
Okay.
We need to have a moment to hash this through.
do you want to, let's go through the rest of that, because we might even need to talk about a few other things too. So let's go through the rest of some of our concerns, or offers here. So Florida statute on going down to receiving employee on 1B, have exhausted all accrued and credited paid leave, including vacation, 12-month employees. Florida statute just says they have to exhaust all accrued and credited sick leave. It does not include vacation time. And so we want to change paid leave to credited sick leave and strike through including vacation, because Florida statute does not reference vacation time having to be exhausted, only sick leave. And and then in E, the last one, I've been president for 4 years now, and I can't remember anybody being, at least coming through us, being disciplined for sick leave abuse. What does that mean to you? And how would someone be disciplined for that? And how would you catch that? Remember a time. So there may have been one out of the 4 years or none at this point. So how would somebody be disciplined for sick leave abuse? How would you catch it? How would that be handled?
Just spitballing, for example, maybe we've sent out forms, we're trying to get them to engage because they're in a period of no pay and they're not following, the process, and then we end up having to discipline them for being absent without being on approved leave when we've invited them and stated in the letters to make contact.
Would that be a no call, no show though?
How can you discipline somebody on leave?
I guess.
And so, yeah, so I would say that we already have procedures in place for no call, no show if you've been trying to engage with them and they're not responsive and they're out. Because if they're already on an approved leave, then they wouldn't be abusing sick leave. And I know we've had issues with attendance with people going into unpaid leave, but we've also had issues with principals approving that. And so that's to no fault of an employee if a principal's approving that.
To me, the sick leave abuse was something that came out last time
Mm-hmm.
from your side to us. But to me, what I see in here a lot is I've already given somebody an attendance discipline letter once or twice because they continue to be reminded that you can't be absent without leave. And then we continue, it's the attendance focus we've had for several years. And then you have all of a sudden a conditional rise and when people begin to contribute leave to somebody who's already been in a condition, be it abuse or be it legitimate, I can't discriminate. All I know is you're absent without leave, period. And so you get a letter. And so to me, I'm sure if I were the person who was donating my leave, I would want to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
But I also think, and I think we as a team feel that if somebody's in that situation where they're out of leave, and we don't know what their situation is. If they're out of leave for whatever reason and somebody wants to give them leave so that they're not in that situation anymore, that this would prohibit them based on what I think I've heard you say.
And the
And
other,
we don't want to be in that space.
the other condition that can happen is we have the earn it, burn it. Okay.
Mhm.
And so they receive 2 letters of discipline and they come up with a really legitimate situation. And they've already had discipline because they've been earn it, burn it, and not been concerned about anything legitimate with a medical condition come about. There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just saying, nobody can be confident what life offers around any corner, but you need to be mindful of the process. And if you have been earn it, burn it, and then you end up in a legitimate place, that's unfortunate. You've been disciplined for attendance issues at that point in time.
But I guess because you're stricken through attendance though, and then you've added sick leave abuse, so
That was something we discussed last
yeah.
time.
So but it sounds to me like you're still treating an attendance issue as sick leave abuse. And I think that's counterintuitive to what the donated leave would be trying to help somebody out with.
Let me ask that.
Go ahead, Mary.
Well, first of all, it is self-monitoring because I'm not likely to give my sick leave to a so I think that we can trust our employees in using their discretion if they want to, because somebody could be disciplined and then get diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And maybe I'm going to change my mind or there's some circumstance, but this is the statute allows it and the employee chooses to do it. So I'm not understanding what the big problem is with us trying to micromanage the choice of an individual to donate leave to somebody.
I'm making my point. I'm just making the discussion relative to the earn it, burn it, and the
So-
concerns with that. And to your point, how would you know if somebody had or hadn't been disciplined?
Well,
Unless you're just taking rumor or you're taking them on face
Well,
value
isn't it-
to tell you those things.
I'm going to know it now when I go to apply to give Wilfredo sick leave. And it's refused because you have to give me a reason. And the only reason you can turn it down is if she's had discipline. So now we've got a confidentiality issue. But on top of that, I'm just not sure why, if we have somebody willing to give their time, why we're going to want to stop that for somebody who may have had a legitimate concern, because it says, may have had something going on that maybe we didn't know about, but we're now going to preclude us being able to do that when they've had this crisis come up in their life. And so I just think it's limited by the fact that most people are going to donate to the people that they feel that they need to, and they will not donate their sick leave in any large number to a burn it person, because I've been a part of those conversations with people.
Future people they can know is on staff with and they know
Yeah.
about it.
So, well, just in conversation before you guys caucus, something to talk about with your team, in part E, because again, we do hear you, and if somebody has been egregiously abusing something and you have that pattern of abuse, but that would be at that point through progressive discipline, a step 3. So if maybe they've been disciplined at a step 3 or higher, which I guess step 4 would be termination. But if they've been disciplined for step 3 for sick leave abuse, I think that shows a pattern of egregiousness.
It's chronic then.
Because then that's chronic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
chronic.
so that would, because step 3 is a suspension without pay. So if you've had this conversation with this person, they've been disciplined 3 times now through progressive discipline for patterns of sick leave abuse, we think that would be more appropriate.
in the previous 12 months.
Yes.
That's what-
Yes. And we might even want to do that because with Because with just cause and progressive discipline, they get up to 3 years to hang that on. So offering that, because that can be used against them, aggressive discipline for up to 3 years.
Okay.
And then in the last part with the 200 hours, 465 hours is 12 weeks. And so we would, if you absolutely need a cap, we would say we would be comfortable with looking at 500 hours in a calendar year. And then an exception can be made by the superintendent. But if we have very sick people, the superintendent could make an exception with that approval process.
We have those cases.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
And so we would offer that as you guys go into caucus.
All right, that's it for us. If you can give us maybe 10 minutes.
Perfect.
All right, we'll be right back. And we're gonna go in the other room right next door.
Let's stop. Let's stop.
Oops.
Okay, Brian.
Definitely long.
There. Right.
I'm sure. I swear to God, everything was roped off. Give me 1 second.
All right, we're ready.
Okay, yes, we're ready.
Yes, please.
Or. Lisa. Just need to make sure that.
There you go. Okay. All right, okay, thank you. Okay.
See, I told you it wasn't school. It's just, I literally parked right next to where the rope was. These pictures of a semi truck almost in Kevin College. It was such a beauty.
Oh my gosh.
All right, you ready?
Yes,
Are we back on? We're
yes,
good?
I think we're ready. Yeah.
All right. I wanted to walk this through in conversation or a presentation, and then we could, if we come together, we can go to a language, place of language. I'll start kind of toward the tail end and work our way back. So you were good. Let's start from 6 of 6. We were good with 6 of 6, right?
Yeah.
No change. 5 of 6 we were also good with.
Yeah.
As well. And then on page 3 of 6 was my next thing, working backwards.
Yes,
So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna take the step 3 on E.
okay,
And so that is something we'll agree on.
okay,
And then I want to kind of unpack this whole piece here about the receiving and donating piece. That's what we were discussing,
Okay.
not just language wise, but process wise as well.
so we're looking at number 3,
Yes,
okay,
we're looking at donating and receiving employee language.
Okay.
There's a discussion about our established sick leave bank processes that are all groups that we donate and contribute a uniform amount, and that's driven and dictated by statute.
Mhm.
And we have this statute 1012.61 that directs how we handle. Stephanie wants to give
Mhm.
Brian, sick leave.
Yeah.
And then we go from there. They kind of operate under different auspices, in different ways. And so what we want to present is first, the idea of the 200 hours. I first want to keep the reference to school board policy because the policy references the 200 hours. But I want to have language that would then go to an exception if something goes beyond, an event goes beyond 200 hours, there would be a review by the superintendent. It kind of the stepping stone or the idea as we went into caucus. But before it would come to the superintendent, I think here's the key piece. I think this is interesting. That we would have a committee that would meet. So anybody that goes over 200 hours It can be a qualifying event. It can be any of those conditions that would make that would fall into that statutory provision. Then someone, no more than 5 members from your representation could be there. And then we would have a representative from risk, HR, payroll, and then the superintendent's designee. And what we're getting at then would be, at that point in time, we're back to reviewing, we have board policy. Has more hours or has a condition where they need more time, that committee can make a review, have that consideration, push it forward, and then the superintendent could review it, ultimately, let's say for approval, more hours presented to them for that qualifying condition. It's kind of moving toward this idea where if I could push out down the road 2 or 3 more years, I would like to have this whole group and committee process established for how we handle 1012.61. And then we have this separate group out here. And there's a lot to unpack and to do there, but that's kind of moving in that direction where, okay, if the group says this person needs more, then that's what gets presented. And so that's the concept, not the language, but the concept of what we would discuss. Oh, and one more thing. We agree that we're going to focus on the statute of sick versus vacation. So we're agreed there as well.
Okay.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on Stephanie, on the proposal Stephanie put forward, the 500? Why are you're rejecting that? Why are you rejecting?
I'm rejecting the presentation of 500 because I'll give you 2 to 3 good reasons. First, we have board policy that says 200, and I'm not going to bargain something against board policy. Second, before we even had gone in to work with Neola or otherwise, when you look out and survey other districts, as risk management has already done, you'll find that there's already a standard across multiple districts of 200 hours that's established out there. So that's not an arbitrary random number that we just thought we'd pull out. We're looking at best practices and we're looking at what other districts do, not indifferent to what you do when you look out to what other folks, how they bargain and what their contracts say. So that's where the 200 came from and why we're holding the 200.
So I'm concerned though that we're using board policy that shouldn't have been developed without coming to the table to begin with. Because this, and we've done this history now for the last couple of years and this happened under previous administration. And so we're having to go back and clean this up because, the person that was in your place formerly wouldn't even touch this. And they created a board policy and then this is a mandatory subject of bargaining because it benefits. And so I think we would disagree in that holding to board policy is irrelevant because board policy can and should change to reflect what is in our contract and lines up with statute. Because right now what's in board policy goes above even the statute outline and puts unnecessary restrictions on employees that statute doesn't speak to. And so board policy is your bottom tier. Contracts next, and then statute. Contract trumps board policy.
Actually, that's not correct. And we talked about this previously. Board policy has every right to exceed state minimum requirements. We do that across the board in countless other areas. We do it with safety, we do it with discipline, we do it with all kinds of things. Board policy supersedes statute.
It does not
Because
supersede
it's not
contract.
violation, it's not in direct conflict with the statute. It actually is establishing a more rigorous threshold for the requirement. And
But
so
board policy cannot be made with the this is
board policy staff.
We have,
And so now we need to fix it.
I'd have to see some evidence that it was attempted to be addressed for use.
We can get that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The second thing, so this kind of goes back to that whole thing. I understand for the sick leave. I understand for one, if we do set a cap and it's exhaustive for that committee, but is that the only time it's going to meet? Because otherwise we're again running into that thing where I'm saying this is my time. I've earned it. I want to give it to her. That should not be a committee's decision whether or not I can do that.
the problem is also, and we run into, there needs to be a if we were to agree to something like that, and I don't know that we should or are going to, but there needs to be rationale for denying. It can't be arbitrary. There needs to be a rubric, a system by which we are judging. Otherwise, is my stage 2 less than your stage 1 cancer? Is my stage 4, more than, it becomes very arbitrary and can be viewed as.
Again, we had this conversation. We are getting out of the business of managing your sick bank.
But it sounds like.
That doesn't
you're trying to
sound like
do
it.
Doesn't sound like it here.
Establishing parameters. That's your committee. So what you currently have proposed is that if somebody exceeds the threshold, it has to come to my office for review. No, it should go back to the committee that you and AFSCME and everybody else represents. You make that decision. If you approve it, it can come to my office for the final approval. You're trying to circumvent your responsibility to manage the bank.
No,
Manage the
This
issue.
isn't a bank.
And
This isn't-
respectfully, this is also going to get back to the point that Greg mentioned a few moments ago, which is how many instances of of abuse does this actually exist? Well, you'll get a good sense of that when you see the same person coming back to the committee each and every time. Additionally, one part that Brian did not address is, quite frankly, the workload that is put on us. Because the larger the amount of time that you get that people donate, the more responsibility it puts on us to meet the statutory requirement to return any unused leave. And so, no, we want a manageable threshold. There's nothing that says they can't apply repeatedly. There's nothing that says when the 200 hours expires, they can't get a donation again. But
But
respectfully,
this says
you guys
within a
need to ask
12-month period.
Yeah.
But this says within a 12-month period, and that's not what I just heard you
The
say.
committee can come back, and there's always exceptions where the committee can reevaluate. There are special circumstances, and I think Laura used the language, what was it, catastrophic illness?
In the bank, yes.
And so there's other opportunities for you to explore how you want to manage this. We're not trying to limit, we're just trying to manage it, because I want, quite frankly, if I had my way, we'd have nothing to do with it. I mean, say, you guys create your own bank someplace else and you manage it, because it's placing the burden on us. Quite frankly, I don't care how much time is donated, but I want a manageable process because I have to lessen the burden and workload, because it's not just a payroll issue. It's a risk management issue because they have to go through all the paperwork and documentation, and we have to go back to payroll and say, okay, now you gotta start returning leave unless it's a family member. Because that's the only exception currently within the statute, which we've talked about last time. It's ridiculous. And we're not trying to stand in the way of donated leave, but we need it to be manageable.
So then what I hear then is that 200 hours is manageable for your team as far as the donation, but then within 12 months, if we're not going to cap it, if they can get it within blocks, then there shouldn't be a within 12 months, because then that triggers the committee, based on what I'm hearing.
Shut down a little bit.
Because I guess from our standpoint, when we did the math, if we're looking at covering somebody for FMLA, which is 12 weeks, 60 days, that's about 500 hours. And so that's where that number came from us. It wasn't an arbitrary number, because nobody's going to leave donated to them if they're on an unpaid medical, or if they're on a personal, or if they're on an educational leave, on any of those approved leaves. They would have to be on either the consistent FMLA or intermittent FMLA. And so that would cover them for that up to 12 weeks if somebody wanted to donate that time. 500 is that number of hours that would cover them for that FMLA 12 weeks.
Problem is, it's not likely to come from an individual, right?
No, but it's from
$500
multiple.
probably gonna come from, we had the situation before, middle of last year, right? We had somebody who was diagnosed with cancer, and I think 20, 30 people all donated time. Again, the management of that time and how we return unused time becomes the problem. So if you're open to some language that says, I don't think we have, and I have to call this with the team again, connection to, revising the 12-month requirement. But I think, again, there's already language that says that it's catastrophic. If it needs to go beyond that, there needs to be an appeal process. It needs to go to you guys first. You guys need to review and evaluate whether or not that person is qualified. And then it can come to me for signature. I'm fine with that. But I think continuing to put the onus on us to review and evaluate those things puts us in a difficult position where if we make the tough decision that employee doesn't agree with, you guys then have to come back as now it's being agreed. No, you guys have skin in the game on the front end and have your committee review it.
I didn't have a problem with the committee. That's what my question was this a committee that only meets when we've reached whatever?
I can tell you about,
Question is,
yeah, I can tell you practice how it works or how it would work. Typically on Linda's side, somebody comes in and, you know, they've gone through the process and we hit that threshold where they're at the max.
Yeah.
Or we have the husband is needing hours and the wife is needing hours. And we're meeting, trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to impact this employee relative to the need that they have. I like the backstop of having a group of people that can come together and say, here's what we got. You know, we're over 200. Yeah, everybody, we're good to go. And you're moving on forward. I will say this with I think with the language on Roman numeral 3, the lowercase Roman 3, we're up to 200 within a 12-month period. I believe that language we could consider striking through with the consideration that we have the backstop of the committee that says, okay, when we hit 200, we're meeting. And to your point of a standing, I never really answered your question. It's not a standing kind of an issue. It's a situational based issue.
Standing.
It's in
There and then there.
Right.
And once there's an issue.
As requests come up.
a committee, you pull it together when you need to.
And I was picturing, even when we were in caucus, we could do this in a physical room, you know, team somehow, we could, you know, discuss. But this would allow us to have flexibility to review situational cases while being complicit with statute, and allowing us as a group to discuss and for that matter, evaluating how those hours are banking up as well. You know, we talked about that too, relative to we've got to track everything that comes in back out. And so if we're monitoring situations, and I don't mean monitoring to not get them the hours, but we don't need to take in 700 hours if we know somebody's only going to be out for a couple, you know, 3 or 4 weeks or whatever. We can control that. But my Roman numeral 3 is contingent on having that committee that would be in place before we throw it back to consideration of the superintendent if it's in excess of 200. And then he would have the backstop relative to the committee and what we've recommended.
Just as a hypothetical, Mr. Hyde, would you take the recommendation of the committee or would you,
That's a recommendation.
it would just be a recommendation at that point?
I may not. I would have conversations probably.
Yeah.
Rationales for it. But I don't see the likelihood of that happening. Unless we knew something that maybe the committee wasn't aware of. For example, falsification of medical documents or those types of things. And we have had that happen. So I would always provide a rationale, but no, it would not be customary practice just to deny it, for the sake of deny it. Again, I don't care how people use it. I really don't. It's a benefit to our employees. It's earned leave. They should be able to donate it. Only should there. But I think we have to do our due diligence. Now, unfortunately, there are times where we know things that the committee may not be aware of. And I can talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Without disclosing any personal information, but I can say, no, this is why I would be rejecting this with the understanding that they could read it or they could do whatever they choose to after that. But no, it would not be a practice that we.
Okay. Just so I understand where we're at, because I think we're just going to take a few minutes.
Yeah.
But it will be pretty quick. You guys are good with on 1B on 206, 1B crossing out paid and doing credited sick leave and crossing out including vacation. That was good with that.
Let me just. Okay, 1B, they were good with.
Okay. Okay.
But you want to add
The 12-month employees. Oh, is that?
tracking vacation.
Yeah. Only 12-month people with vacation.
I've exhausted all approved.
So read what
credit
it'll
paid
say.
Sick leave, personal forever to sick leave.
We want to add personal
Yeah.
charge with the sick in there because it's the same,
And they all, yeah, the same, right?
but just so it's clear for the employee. They may think they have those personal days left, but they don't.
Well, it gives
I
you,
really think that makes it
it makes it
confusing
I agree.
because they are confused by explaining that it's one pot of money, but out of this pot, you get 6 of those
You can use
or to use as personal items.
And actually, I think that works against you because I'm gonna have less personal charge for sick leave available than my sick leave.
Yeah, so I would rather just say sick leave is down, it's 1 of hours. Vacation's a separate pot,
Mhm.
but personal still sick, and it's 1 pot of
It
hours.
makes it very muddy.
Yeah, because that's already such a confusing thing for people.
So beginning again with 2B, I mean 1B. Have exhausted all accrued and credited paid leave. Including vacations that we just
No,
said.
no, just saying sick leave, not saying personal charges sick. Personal charges sick is sick leave. And I think that already is a muddy issue and people don't understand.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
We'll try and it tracks through the statutes.
Yeah. Okay. And then going back up on page 2 of 6, including the statute number
Mhm.
and striking board policy. And including the statute number reference for 1012.61. Because this is where this lives. And because right now, policy is gonna have to be made to reflect these contract changes. So I'd rather reference than board policy. Because the statute changes, we have to live with
I
the
want to be
statute.
clear here.
Yeah, go ahead.
In 20.1-8, so long as I have board policy reference and or Florida, I'm gonna be okay. And I think currently it was board policy both places.
Yeah, we,
Any employee who wishes to donate authorized transfer of sick leave to another employee shall be able to do so. It says currently within board policy. Should there be a change in Florida statutes
Mhm.
and or school board policy, both parties agree. I believe it's already there.
so
We've got statute and policy referenced all in the same place.
So we're wanting board policy gone because we're wanting to reference Florida statute, because right now, board policy is in contradiction to our contract language. And so, and it goes above even what statute says, which the board has a right to do with mandatory subjects of bargaining. It has to be bargained. They can't just arbitrarily change policy that impacts wages, hours, and working conditions. And we're comfortable just referencing Florida statute, since this is where the sick leave donation lives.
The second sentence where it says, should there be a change in Florida statutes and or school board policies, both parties agree. That reference to policy will remain.
No, we would want school board
I
policy stricken
disagree. I
through.
disagree completely.
If board policy changes, you can't change that with mandatory subjects of bargaining, just arbitrarily. It needs to reflect what's in our contract, or if it's silent, we have an opportunity to come back to the table.
I'm not comfortable with that.
Can I ask you why?
And further, I think, is this, our existing language was, what did we start with before we ever started this language at all? It was just, it was within school board policy, I believe it's existing language.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
We added school board policy to bargain to go as a concession to get this in our contract. And then that has actually been more problematic because school board policy was never updated to reflect the contract change. And that's where a lot of the angst has been with donated and received direct sick leave,
Mhm.
is because school board policy goes over what our contract says. And so school board policy needs to be brought in line then.
so I want to continue to discuss existing language of board policy that's in 20.1-8. And then, as we have discussed, with the exception of 200 hours, we can come together and go beyond that. But I'm not in a position where I will waive existing language for 20.1.
But we agree that if school board policy incorrectly reflects, which in the contract, that school board policy needs to be updated.
I have not said that. Those are not,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we stick.
Agree that the school board policy needs to be updated to what is reflected in the CBA. So if the school board policy said, let's just be hypothetical, school board policy 200, and you agreed today to 500, that the policy would have to be changed to reflect the accurate number of 500. Would you agree? Excuse me. Because that's the hitch. The hitch is,
So that he can answer that. And here's
Yeah.
why. It depends on the time in which both, depends on the timeline in which the CBA may have been modified. It depends on which the board policy was either initiated or modified. So that's why I asked for evidence, so that this was requested to be addressed 10 years ago, or whatever the was. And so quite frankly, I received that. I mean, I go back and look at that CBA and when the CBA was established. The board policy was established before the CBA, then never should have been argued. If it was established after the CBA, then yes, it wouldn't be a violation of the CBA and would have to be redressed. So happy to do that, but Brian can't answer whether or not the way you've posed your question can't be answered.
So I guess I'm gonna revise the question, because if we were to agree to something today, which actually the stuff we're agreeing to would need to be updated in board policy anyway. So if we agree at the table,
Well, to a
To
certain
let-
extent, policy doesn't drive,
but
procedurally, we need to have.
contractually, if we agree to something and then board policy ends up being contradictory,
It's a conflict, yeah.
then board policy needs to be updated. And I think that's her question.
that is my question.
That's her question. And so what, even outside of this first part with school board policy being referenced or not, what we're doing here through donated employee leave and receiving employee leave is updating our contract. Thus, board policy needs to then be updated as well, because we cannot have a duly ratified contract that has language that is in conflict with board policy. And so board policy would then need to be updated to reflect what we have agreed to duly in our contract. So that there is not conflicting documents. Because the CBA does trump school board policy when things are explicitly written out. Now, if the contract is silent, board policy obviously would go into effect.
And currently, the practice right now is this doesn't exist, and it says that you should be able to donate at will. And currently, the practice that every time this tries to happen is board policy is coming back at them with this goes against, and that's
the
direct
crux of the problem.
contradiction to the CBA. So right now, it's kind of like, right now, it very clearly says, I can donate, they can receive, end of story, which was what we agreed to a year and a half ago. But every time it comes up in practice, risk management is saying, no, I'm sorry, because that goes against school board policy. So this is the issue. As long as you leave school board policy in the CBA, you are essentially trying to say it's trumping the contract.
And that's where the problem lies. So if we add in a clause where it says in Florida statute and or school board policy, which accurately reflects current contract language, we could get down with that.
People.
So if we are in the second sentence where it says, should there be a change in Florida statutes and or school board policy, which accurately reflects current contract language, both parties agree to impact bargain those potential. I feel much more comfortable with this, because right now we are running into those, that's the angst here. Is because people look at our contract, our duly ratified contract, and it says an employee may donate any amount of their accrued sick leave to another board employee. The authorizing employee must have at least 10 days and the whole, the rest of it. And then they're being told on the risk side, no, because board policy, and that needs to get in line. So that employees aren't frustrated with trying to donate or receive leave. And that's really the crux of the problem here. And so if we're going to leave board policy in, we would feel much more comfortable in having that qualifier. Because board policy does and should be and does need to be updated.
In the interest of time,
Mhm.
because I won't spend all our time here today. We have presented a concept of the committee and that piece. And I hear what you're saying about the seconds as well. We have had clarification on the sick versus vacation statute, everything else.
Yep.
So what I'm proposing is, let's take this back and we will present a counter, or not a counter,
Well,
but
and we're going to
a
talk.
new language So you can see print to what we're talking about with the language to the concept of the committee.
Okay,
And the, with exceptions on the superintendent, we'll go from there.
Mhm.
And then we can engage in another discussion, at
Okay.
that time.
okay.
And then we can keep moving into the next slide.
Yep. All right, that
Is
was,
that good with parties?
of course. So just to understand, you're gonna go back, clean this up on what we have agreed, what we're still talking through, and you're gonna add in, Laura, some language to look at with what you're proposing for committee.
Yes.
And we're not necessarily agreeing to that.
No, but we're just gonna look at it.
Yeah.
Then you'll have words in front.
We can see it.
After.
Okay. All right, that works. And then we'll have even at the top of our team.
In the language that Stephanie just read to you, we're pushing that across the table, right? In other words, that's the
Yeah.
language we want to, okay.
So we would like that qualifier, which accurately reflects current contract language, if we're gonna keep school board policy in.
And that's something as we go back and review our counter to you,
Mhm.
we'll review whether that comes back as food or as something like that.
I think
So you would need a few minutes or do you want to move? on
we
to the
probably
next
only
article?
need 5 minutes, to talk about this. If you want to table this,
Take which one?
20 to come back, or if Laura wants to have some time to work on it.
And then we'll bring it back in another couple of meetings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, see what I'm saying?
I gotcha. Okay.
So now we can just go to,
Yep.
21,
that works.
feature 21 if you're
We're
good.
gonna.
Hey, okay, when-
I think,
New 21.
Let's go to Article 21.
We will make copies for the 28th of hurricane,
gotcha.
but we did have some changes after hurricanes.
Okay.
Or-
And you have to- you want to say move on?
Page 21, make sure you're looking at 9-6, not 8-28.
9-6.
9-6.
Ah, please take the paper.
This is good paper.
You know what I'm saying?
It's looking at the letterhead. Another paper, I believe.
If you have.
It's fancy paper.
Karen, you-
It's fancy
Yeah,
paper.
but actually. Yeah, sorry. Now you do. There we go. Did you have a brand new 21? Well, that's amazing.
Right?
Oh, is it on this paper? 9-6?
9-6.
Is it on a yellow? Yeah, that's right.
Yes, sir, I just gave them.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
fine.
Thank you.
No problem. Take a note. Someone else.
Yeah, because I have a few questions on one.
All right, we'll work this through page by page. 1 of 8, there were no changes on page 1 of 8. Page 2 of 8,
We were good with the first part. That was
that was a language change we discussed last time we were together on 21.6.
Thank you.
Employees on an unpaid leave must pay for all the benefits, including a portion. We talked about the process of how we notify them of that. And then life insurance will be continued with premium payment during a leave of absence, a continuation of employees' insurance under the group policy required by state mandated Family or Medical Leave Act of law, or during any other scheduled leave of absence approved by the board in advance and in writing and lasting not more than 60 days. And then disability insurance will be continued with premium payment during a leave of absence of continuation of employees insurance under the group policy required. It's the same language as before, except this time it goes to not lasting more than 30 days. Are there any questions on 21.6?
Yes, so the life insurance was 60 days, that's like an FMLA leave. And so anything past FMLA
Mhm.
wouldn't be covered.
Well, what it would have to be, it would have to be a converted policy. The
Okay.
provision of continuing life insurance changes
Okay.
from under term life insurance to a different type of product. And that's mandated really by our policy and how that's filed under state law.
Okay. And then, so what's the difference in the not lasting more than 30 days? in
30
the
days.
second? Can you explain
Again,
that?
provisions on how the disability insurance product is filed in the
Okay,
state of Florida.
okay,
So if you wanted to look at different than that, I would have to approach our carrier to look at, filing, they have to file under state law their policy. for
Okay.
Certain provisions.
okay. So if they have life insurance and I guess we're trying to look at this through the lens of like FMLA.
Sure.
Because if they're on unpaid leaves, it's,
Yeah,
they can pay their board insurance if they want it, but
correct.
these types of things. So if somebody is on like an unpaid leave, an approved unpaid leave, and they choose to pay their board insurance because
Mhm.
maybe they can't get something cheaper on the exchange or whatever the
Sure.
reasons are, would they still be able to pay into their life and disability?
They would
For
have
fringe
to,
benefits?
or after this time period, we would have to look at either a conversion or portability, depending
Okay.
upon their health. Under state law and federal law, if they're not healthy, they have to convert,
Uh-huh.
which tends to be more of a whole life policy.
Yeah.
And it's guaranteed. Portability.
Yeah.
Portability assumes that you're healthy, but you're continuing to pay it
Okay,
through a different mechanism. So there's an application and a process that we
okay,
would work through with the employee.
But there is an existing process for
Yeah.
that.
yeah,
There is, yeah.
Okay.
So, your state and federal law and all your leaves are covered, obviously, because that has to be
Yeah.
allowed during that time period.
yeah.
It's just really the unpaid leaves. And then they're limited to that time period.
So the disability is not through the full, then it's only for half of it?
Well, they would be getting a bit, but it'd be the continuation. It says any other scheduled leave of absence approved by the board in advance in writing and not lasting more than 30 days. So,
And it's
if
30
they
days,
also,
it's not
if they're
30.
receiving a benefit, this is continuing the policy, but if they're receiving a benefit, they're still continuing to receive their benefit until such time as they're no longer disabled or which is typically 65.
Okay. And so I know with FMLA, when we did the unpaid leaves, we did 60 work days because that was 12 weeks. So is this 60 work days or 60 calendar days?
I believe it's 60 calendar days.
That wouldn't cover the full FMLA then.
Well, but it says that can be continued during the state mandated family or medical leave
Okay.
after loss. So this is scheduled
Gotcha.
absence. This is more the unpaid leave, Stephanie.
Okay, I see.
The unpaid leaves that aren't mandated by a different provision.
So FMLA is covered and then it's just the other ones. Okay.
And that segues into 21.7, which is what happens after that period of time.
Mhm.
Basically, it's the same language, which is SEPTA says there at the very end. An employee's insurance will be reinstated pursuant to federal, state mandated family medical law.
Mhm.
Okay.
At such time they become eligible, I think is what it says.
Okay.
So if I come back from a leave from FMLA, it
Mhm.
picks up.
Yes.
That's not a problem. But if I come back from another leave, am I guaranteed to have it pick back up again?
Only if you're within that 90-day provision in here, like if you're unpaid medical leave. And typically people at the time they go on a medical leave will determine what benefits they want to continue. And we do caveat that if they decide not to continue life or disability, they could be subject to evidence of insurability later and approval. But within the policy, it says if they're a member again within 90 days, their waiting period is, in other words, they pick up automatically at that point. And they can enroll as a newly covered member, meaning, they can elect whatever coverage they would want at that time.
But they're guaranteed issuance?
Yes, up to 150, which is the way our policy reads. Anything above 150 always requires evidence of insurability.
Good, at 6 and 7 will go on.
Yes.
There were no other changes to page 4 of 8. As of day, we picked up the language from our previous MOU,
Mm-hmm.
changing from 7 years to 1 on the education label on Article 21.10 education leave.
Do you have a counter to the MOU today?
I thought we were gonna, I mean, we're good to go with that, right?
Okay,
I
we
thought we
ended
were-
up the last meeting and I didn't hear a response.
I am so sorry. There was a lot of papers thrown at the very end.
There was.
And so let's print 2 clean copies of that and let's get that wrapped up today. Sorry. That was a lot of papers at the end. Yeah, and actually, if we're gonna go ahead and with this, we should just cross out 7 and then just add in 1 here,
That was the
because that shores the contract language up.
they'd made the agreement 110 on before at least.
So we'd be crossing through 7 and then adding in 1. And I think that shores it up because we already have the TAs for the 10-. Then we were good with on page 6 of 8. Yeah, yeah, and we're good with your board paid health insurance and group life insurance down at the bottom. We were good with that.
7 of 8, we had no longer
Okay.
change there, and 8 of 8 is.
Yeah.
So I believe we are really just up to the 7 to 1.
Yeah, if we can change that, Laura, and print it, I think we're good with 21.
I'm gonna resend it, just to make sure. So,
Yeah, let's do that.
am I doing MOU or the which one?
We can do both
We were,
to get the MOU active, and
we probably need to do the interview because they did that previous.
Yeah.
And then
we can do both.
the language that we just proposed, we just need to strike through 7 level.
And then add 1 and then we're good to go. We can do both.
Yeah.
I think, and we have a year or 2 so you can sign the MOU.
And I think we got all of our,
I just resent it, I wanna make sure you've seen it
Okay.
on the 23rd.
Oh, it's trying to pick up your hotspot, not the, this is not 59, that's fine. I'm gonna reconnect back to PCS. It like picked up his hotspot, and it wasn't coming through,
My house.
or somebody's hotspot, wasn't mine. Taking that far.
She resolved, just emailed you, just emailed you.
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah, TA.
Yeah. Well, we're at TH1. But they're adding in,
So,
they're adding in here, the 7. We're changing this from 7 to 1 is good. Finally came through, but I read it on cat.
I'm gonna make that.
Okay.
Printing MOUs, you can see that. I need to see strike throughs.
Okay.
There was another section for that. The military.
Did you have
Gone to that as we stopped the donation. That covered that was already provisions. Somebody can just. We're gonna third that one. It's not on the.
No, we said we were good with that, Linda.
The military?
Oh, we.
We were good with that last
Military
time.
leave.
Yeah, we said we
Well,
were,
but we added provisions just because there were issues with reservists and what we can do when they're activated versus.
So where are you talking?
yeah, I don't see anything new though.
No, that's because it was given.
It's 20 or 21.
This is under, 23.3.
Oh, we're not at 23 yet.
We're at
No,
20.
I know.
Oh, okay.
We haven't touched that
I
one
know,
yet.
20.13 is what, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
20.13. We never got there.
2113. Or 20.13.
There was just some language my carrier gave me for that, so we need to make sure is in their carriers. So, make sure it's clear.
Well, if you guys are bringing back a counter anyway, just, I guess, include,
Yeah, well,
That's
we'll make sure it's in there.
disability in the group term will be signed out under the paid leaves.
That's
It's in both sections.
gotcha.
Good with that.
Yeah, Linda's saying though that there was something new that she sent,
That wasn't here, me.
because we were good with what was discussed on the 23rd.
Well, there were questions as far as the military aspect and how that worked, and I had to make sure with our carrier that the language matches our contract with them. So,
So she's saying there's something new that was sent to today or something like that?
yeah, it
We're
was,
gonna bring you a counter back.
Yeah,
yeah,
This one anyway.
okay.
yeah, we'll have to make sure it's in there.
Okay, because we were good with the military stuff. So.
Well, but I gotta make sure that I'm not contrary.
No, I get it.
And I'll make sure it's clear in the,
And on what was.
No,
put over.
we went through several edits internally, so.
Pass that back. We can get us wrapped up today.
Yeah, I.
Yes.
Lego keeps jumping.
Sure, she needs a section too.
And she just signed two.
Yeah.
She's.
Yeah.
Do we have 21?
Forward.
Do you want me to add calendar days under 30 and 60 to clarify?
Yes.
So I got an angry.
Hmm?
No, I know it's like you shine, you touched it.
Oh, gotcha.
I know.
I just got a question. That's fine. Do you have 23 for us to look at while Laura is, doing 21?
Yes, sir. I'm not, Miss Fleming, I'm sending something.
Situation.
I don't ever remember this. I don't know. The question I asked. I don't know, but I don't remember type stuff.
Thank you. Should we have copies of the attendance sheet so we can staple them through the houses? And staplers from the district or paper heads. And go.
The superintendent just has. Is going through. That's where I start from. So.
Oh, I think at this time, I think it's.
You want to sign off for that?
I think we need to.
Oh, yeah.
But it isn't coming from the.
It is.
Okay.
What's the date?
That's now. I run a team and give team what we have the language based upon what we do in the language is correct. Either through you or through the district.
It's going to.
PEA. Treat the table. Not some. The team. We agreed. Why didn't we keep it clean? Yeah.
Paid you one for one.
Hold on. I handed it to her after one page and then I didn't initial the other page. So I gotta go back to it.
We don't want to.
Guys, we're faster this time.
Yeah.
It's going to do that. See it again.
I'm just dating each page. Just so you know.
Considerations.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Because this refers back to the other section anyway. So that is. Fine. The price. Laura, there is one other thing.
Are you sure attendance sheet for that one? That one, then, buildings, sure, we'll keep this one. Once you guys sign that one, you can hand it to Laura, and that'll be yours.
I don't know, he has to be heard.
You needed a keyboard?
Maybe he's still waking up. My apologies.
No worries.
All right.
Step.
Oh, sorry. Change the line.
Are we good? Next, we're going to Article 23.
Fancy.
Oh, you took it. No, you can take it if you have more. It's in my thing. No, you're good. I'm good. Okay.
Used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're going to begin Article 23, teacher insurance. We've been talking about this since the last time we're together, and we have our youth, the union proposed 823, and we're countering on 9.6. If you look at Article 23.3, there's under the full language there, employees must make an active election within 60 days of hire to waive these board paid benefits. See 23.8 below. And I had made a remark that I thought we were.
Yeah, we were
that
good with
language
that.
last time. We had some follow-up on 23.4 because we wanted to clarify carefully the date of hire to make sure that captured what we need to do.
Okay.
The date of hire and in parentheses appointment date, they are synonymous. They are one and the same.
So does that take care of what we were talking about with the international teachers and new hires having access to the clinics?
It would.
I think
Okay.
it does. I
Yeah.
think it does. And to be honest, I mean, it does take into account, there are times we're still working through the eligibility process
Mhm.
with versus hire versus when you're insured.
Okay,
But, I saw an email of concern, I guess, that it happened one time, somebody had been denied access, but that
yeah,
could never have happened.
okay,
So,
okay,
'cause we normally get those calls and we review and approve those.
yeah, okay.
So,
So then that takes care of, and just to be clear, that also includes the international teachers have access to the health clinic?
if they're on our board payroll, yes.
Okay, and then and just a clarifying question with dependents, and I know you're fixing it down there.
Mhm.
If I'm a new hire, or if I'm or my husband on our insurance and I've elected to do so,
Mhm.
do they have access right away or do they wait 60 days?
No, they wait till the eligibility date of coverage.
Okay,
Okay.
So to that point, that language right under the counter proposal box, eligible dependents must be
Eligible, yeah.
enrolled under the schools board health
Okay.
plan to participate in the school board annex.
and I just wanted to make sure that that was at the 60-day mark, like that's what that
It's
meant.
the first month following 60 days, yes. Yeah.
Any other questions on 4?
Mm-mm.
All right, we'll go to 5. And, we included, group term life insurance, and group disability in the first sentence.
Mhm.
And then we added language underlined where evidence of insurability is required, life or disability. Employees are responsible for submitting all required documentation. Employees are also required to submit dependent documentation, including social security numbers, marriage license,
Mhm.
birth certificates, and tax documentation required to preprint. Dependent eligibility failure to submit will result in benefits not being complete. We had agreed on.
We were good with
last
that.
time.
Yeah.
So then if we go to 23.6, we added that, that's following the 60-day employment that we kept hearing about today. And then we struck it in which the 90th day of employment. And so, I think we had agreement on that last time because that was made them eligible sooner than later.
Yep.
And then 23.7 was no change. 8 was no change. 9 was no change. I'm sorry, 9 does have change. This was the last paragraph.
Mhm.
We've been playing with this language back and forth. I think this was the language you had submitted, and when we tweaked it, and I had a sentence below it. The district and association bargaining teams may consider recommendations from the superintendent's influence committee, which is what we had talked about last time. And then the language below for consideration. Association members who serve on this committee will be responsible for review and analysis of recommendations ultimately presented to the association's bargaining team for consideration. Period. Now, when back to the language, what I was trying to say is kind of like those are your experts in field, you know, they've been in all of the precursor meetings, they know all the details, so, they can address your group and provide answers to things they may have, you know, behind the scenes.
Well, and I think that's already done.
Yeah.
And so just as we were, reviewing this, as we were getting one, because that's already done and really we don't need contract language to direct myself or other members of that team to talk to the bargaining team. Usually they're already bargaining team members who I place on there. And so they're already aware and we already discussed that. So we really think that we can strike through that and it can just say the district and the association bargaining teams may consider recommendations from the superintendent's insurance committee, period. And then I think that gets to where
I'm just going to continue to push forward, you know.
Yeah.
So we can be more efficient, you know, we're not gonna read all of it.
I'm.
All
right.
Very good.
So I think if we, just strike through that last sentence and put a period after superintendent insurance committee, we're good with that.
Yeah.
All right.
Clean
So I was focused on that. Or it would be just a period after, so we can strike that sentence. And then get rid of the additional strike through, and then we should be good to go.
But you may use that.
Yeah.
To say this is our.
Yeah, actually,
Ryan, we'd find, don't worry,
Okay.
whatever.
I just,
That's where that makes.
So if they have to prove that they must submit all these documents.
Does anybody have an empty one? We have circles.
They can do that up. That's happening. They have to be for people to prove.
I remember the country. Yeah.
I don't know. Time gets smaller to try this.
It's like this.
Oh, you got a stapler? Oh, hand me that paper real quick. Oh, all right.
You're her new hero, baby.
thanks, Karen.
Sorry, look at Karen. Okay, yeah, sorry, Karen.
There you go. Yeah.
Brain. The one pager. I'm sending you one more document. Okay.
Do you want, me to work on mirroring this in the parent ESP, or do you want to work on that? In these two that we TA are going to.
I have ESP employee benefits, which have some other items with education needs and everything. Okay. But no, I didn't take care of, because I didn't work it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
1, 3.
okay, thank you.
For a second.
Sheets. Oh, sorry, I thought we were printing a new one, that's why I didn't find.
You initial.
And then I'm gonna, if you're, Laura,
Mhm.
Brian, with this, I'm gonna just strike through that,
Yeah.
because we know that that is covered. Yeah, well, is there another cleaner copy?
Let me just reprint it, Stefan. I mean.
Because mine has tons of stuff on it.
There you go. 23.
Okay. Hold on. Let me get some copies.
Okay, taking out the box. It's Fleming, two are on the way. She works plenty of.
There's a lot of.
I'll do it into. I mean, it's definitely sign.
This is the great phone.
ESP. We had more POs and things.
That's fine.
Yeah, their benefit section combines.
Yeah.
That's for ESP 12. Yes. This is silly.
You need to add something else. Oh, okay, no problem. All right.
This wasn't real clear. So this. This. Yeah, because that's honest. I did. I
knew you did it because I looked.
I think the only thing on 12 is the 12.14 was already TA'd with the educational leave. I think the only thing in 12 then is in 12.9 where we're striking through that last sentence with association number through third. Yeah, so it would need to mirror what we're signing in the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be the district community association bargaining teams may consider recommendations from the superintendent insurance planning period, and then just strike that last sentence. And then I think 12 is ready to go to. But then that's everything else is what we've either TA'd with educational leave
Mm-hmm.
or what we're just TAing now in the teacher insurance. Yeah, sorry, it's a cleaner copy. There's so many circles in the other ones.
We can counter that later, but she can print it.
Okay.
We do.
All right. Just want to make sure. Sure. There it is.
It's 20, 12.9. But the insurance to one thing, maybe use even off.
Well, there's only one sentence that needs to be.
Like the one we just TA'd.
That sentence needs to be deleted, and then we're good to go with 12. There's your signature.
We weren't going to delete it and let it reflect what we just TA'd, right?
Yeah, but that sentence needs to be deleted to reflect. I don't know why I gave you that stapler back. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, we just, that last sentence. Just needs to be stricken through and taken out.
Looking at this breakdown. Stephanie on 12, just had 12.9 revision.
Yeah, it's just,
Everything else.
yeah, everything else is fine. It was either RWTA to the educational leave, or it mirrors what we just agreed to in the insurance. And so we just need to delete that last sentence, under 12.9, and then we're good to go.
How many due dates for children? I mean, I'll put my own. if you want.
So we're creating this one.
Yeah,
Will be, EFP 12.
yeah, ESC 12.
Did I hear the group?
A second.
It's coming soon.
I know that I have one on the seventh.
The teacher.
Only
We're ready to walk across with the sheriff says, yes.
This really.
Yeah.
the health
Yeah, because we're nearing.
We're gonna do that offline.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a health
And I-
insurance.
23, we'll walk us to Paris 14.
Yes, because 12 was taken care of here. And so I don't mind doing it, or I don't, if Laura wants to do, she already has it up.
In the bear.
Yes. We can do a beat at the gas station there.
What GFA school? GFA.
I can.
Thank you.
I'll staple it.
Yes.
Attendance. We have lots. Do you want to jump into the salary grid? Like what JD was able to look at yesterday?
I'll catch up.
What did you?
We have about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I'm bringing.
Do you want to look at the salary grids and what JD was able to cost out and get some information on yesterday?
You can see that the overall food and the guys were saying. Let's see more solid.
No.
Yeah.
Let me propose Article 6, my comment.
Okay.
And then we can not carry, but let's use that as a transition and then segue over to
Okay. Right, that works.
money.
Right, I'm good.
I think you may be some time to think about Article 6, so let's go ahead and hand out Article 6. It was a short one. Thank you. Article 6, teaching conditions. You're welcome.
Thank you. Brandon, do you mind giving us 2 more minutes and 3 more?
This particular, counter, I was looking over the whole packet, the 12 pages we started with, is really regarding, the discussion about letter D that you countered on 823. And your counter was that classroom teachers who are over the board's class size guidelines will be entitled to extra period pay, as outlined in teacher article 425 and 22A11. Duration there over class size guidelines until a teacher is hired to alleviate class size load. Classroom teachers, that for like the course will be also will follow the class size guidelines. We are countering with striking that language, as we are not in agreement or able to determine how that will work. I do want to provide some discussion, as I said, we reject that language. I want to first reference in this particular article, 6.1-5 specifically says a teacher may be requested but not required to substitute during his or her planning time of a teacher. There's established precedent already in contract language there with respect to how teachers can be assigned. If you look with respect to Article 6.3, there's also language there in the second paragraph under 6.3 where it talks about during planning time that a good faith effort must be made by the principal to ensure that equitable scheduling is done to facilitate teacher participation, involvement, and everything else, the 504s, IEP meeting, and for that matter, not taking their plannings or otherwise. It's just the good faith effort piece. And so with respect to during teacher hours, to be quite honest, we pay a teacher to be there to be accountable, to instruct, and to be with students. There's just no way to practice. There's no way. I believe it's a part of the job and the function. Yeah, teacher 4.9 was the teacher responsibilities. Designate to a teacher they're informed of all teacher responsibilities. It should be the duty of a teacher to comply with the requirements among duties or responsibilities for which teachers will be accountable. It's to teach efficiently, faithfully in the classroom, use prescribed instructional materials punctual, fill the terms of the teaching contract unless released from the contract or conform to board rules and regulations on attendance. So I feel like it's part of it, just a responsibility of the teacher. There's contract language in here about good faith efforts to ensuring that they have access to planning times. It's already a provision around to being not mandating, but asking them to sub. So I also want to say that as we considered your language, we also have multiple schools that are currently working with they're moving towards site-based budgeting. And so there's some pilot schools that are using that. And so that will complicate the matter as well. So for those reasons, we're just not able to accept that language.
So a few things. I talked to some of my counterparts in other districts, and just in Central Florida, Brevard County, what they do is they address if they are having a vacancy. So for example, fourth grade vacancy, they split what those kids that would have gone into that teacher's room, but there's a vacancy, they split them. And then those other teachers on the fourth grade team split $270 a day. And they do that as like a daily rate for a teacher. So that's ratified language in Brevard. Brevard currently does this. In Seminole, they signed an MOU this year, August 14th of this year. And this is for teachers taking on an additional class for the entire day or even a half day. So, and this is to the subbing, which we had originally proposed, was the subbing and the splitting of classes. And so this isn't splitting classes necessarily, but it is taking on an additional class. So in Seminole right now, to take on an additional whole class for the entire day, they receive $105. And then they receive half of that if they had them for half the day. And then in Lake County, in their contract, while it's not monetary compensation, they give teachers comp time for either splitting classes to that effect. And so this isn't a novel idea, being done in other districts. And they have a way to operate that somehow. And while it looks different, they do have mechanisms to do that. And so, and I believe if I'm remembering correctly, last time or the time before, you had said, well, it's a management right to just put kids in a classroom. While that's true, I think our team feels that you don't have the right to double a class load just because you don't have teachers. And that's what's happening. And so, and it's not necessarily your fault. It's not our fault. It's the environment of our state right now. Teachers don't want to teach in Florida. And so we have critical shortage in almost every area. And so this issue and this problem is going to continue to get worse, not better, for the foreseeable future. And again, it's nobody here's fault. You know, our state has made teaching hostile in our state. And so people don't want to do the job. And so the problem is just going to continue to get worse. And so while we have FTE money coming in for these children, we have fewer teachers that we can put in front of them. And we want quality teachers in front of them. We don't want kids sitting in front of the sub for a whole year because that doesn't help anybody. You know, and so if we're going to have and make class sizes bigger to have students have a quality, equitable education across the board, we at some point have to look at compensating these teachers for the additional workload, because adding extra kids into their classroom is additional workload. And if you add 5 kids each period, that's like teaching another period, because that's grading almost a whole other period's work. You know, you have to maybe you're not planning for extra for those kids, but you're having to go in and analyze their data for more kids. And so the workload is increasing. And from our viewpoint, with the money we get through FTE dollars in just looking at this year, not in perpetuity, but in this year, if we don't have enough teachers to fill these vacancies, and we're splitting these kids up in teachers, if we could hire them, and then our class loads would be lower. And so we currently, I know at Bartow, we have a geometry class. Cat Son is in a geometry class with 43 kids. That's a tested area. And that's just, you can't put that on a teacher and say, well, this is the hand you've been dealt, figure it out. That cannot be an acceptable answer. And if we had a teacher to teach geometry, that would alleviate that teacher's workload. But we may not currently be able to hire somebody because there may not be a geometry teacher ready to fill that vacancy. And so, and I've heard Mr. Hyde say this before, we have 2 options here. We can either try to fill subs and just have these kids and have supervision come in and out, or we split the classes. And those kids go into a certified educator's room, but then that adds additional workload to that teacher. And so that's where we're coming from with this. This isn't trying to add more money out of the general fund. This isn't trying to get at that. We're trying to use money that if you could hire these people, if they were lining up at the door, you would hire them because we have the vacancy. But we don't have anybody applying and ready to fill these vacancies. So we have an obligation to educate these children. And these children deserve highly qualified, certified educators in front of them. And so we do have 2 options. We have people rotating in and out, covering that class that adds additional burdens to non-instructional, non-classroom teachers through coaches and whatnot. Or we take those kids and split them up among the other geometry teachers or the other algebra teachers or the other science or the other 4th grade team so that they have a certified educator in front of them. And so that's what we're trying to help with, because we know the reality that this isn't going to get better, not anytime soon anyway. And so teachers should be compensated for that extra workload because it is an additional workload. And so that's where we're coming from with this. This isn't arbitrary. This isn't trying to squeeze. You know, this is a real concern that it's not just isolated to Bartow. That was just the example we're bringing. It's all over. It's all over. And so we have to have a way to compensate teachers for the additional workload, because it is like teaching an extra period. When you add 5, 6, 7 kids in each period, that's like you having an extra period of children.
And to be clear, the concept of having students in our class, yes, is part of our job description, but the reason why the amendment on the surface, I know all of the loopholes, the reason why the amendment was passed in and of itself is because you also then turn around and evaluate us on our test scores, our disciplinary procedures, our classroom management, and we can stick 56 high school children in one classroom and then discipline that teacher for not being effective. Like you are creating a problem that you're then going to turn around and blame the teacher
Right.
for. Because we're not gonna make the test scores. And that at the end of the day does impact our bottom line because that goes to our performance pay. That goes for our grandfather teacher towards stipends. That goes to our hireability later on when we leave the district for ones that are willing to compensate us financially well.
And so that's the origin of this. And so we're gonna come back with a counter,
No,
you know,
we're gonna hold on this language. This is good language.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you feel that way, but this is good language. So the language remains on the table. We're gonna hold on this language. I think you do.
and when I said counter, I meant a counter to their strike through. Sorry.
Putting
Okay,
it back in,
all right.
putting it back on the table.
Yes, it's back
Because
on the
we
table.
really need to find a way to work through this. Because this problem isn't gonna get worse. It's not gonna get better. It's gonna get worse. And if we have surrounding districts that are addressing it,
And I will say this, as you reflect with your team for accountants, because of our rejection of this proposal. As I've thought through the process, for example, now we're looking at all-day teaching assignments, we're looking at all the extra period assignment pieces. That's what we're working through now. And what I've learned by looking through that language is we need to be very mindful that the landscape is always changing around us. I don't know how that works, but not for a semester or a year, because we could hire a teacher, or we
Well,
could go through
and
a cut and then the whole
Absolutely.
allocation changes. Or we could have kids in
Yeah.
school because we're building, we're remodeling, and then,
we don't disagree with that.
So keep that, if you mind,
Yeah.
if I may, just, those are things on my mind as well. I want to be mindful of our resources and how we would engage for the next one.
I guess,
And I think just real quick, because we did address that in our language. The duration, they are over class size guidelines until a teacher is hired to alleviate the class size split. And you're using that money that you would have paid teacher if you would have filled that vacancy. Because that money's already there through FTE to fill that vacancy. And once you hire a teacher to alleviate the class size, the teacher that had the class load split doesn't continue to get that money.
right.
And just to clarify that.
So, I mean, what is it like that we're countering here? You're rejecting the very principle of the language. Is that what you're doing? Because you went through the responsibility.
I believe it is part of the job function.
Gotcha.
I get your discussions. I understand 56 and 43. That's all dependent on us hiring teachers, on vacancies. It's on zoning. It's on a whole myriad of factors. But that landscape for education and for teachers isn't any different than when I was in the classroom, when my mother was in the classroom. These are the same dilemmas of classrooms being overcrowded when they split or when they did different things.
So it doesn't matter what language you put forward, you're going to reject it if it's consistent with the language we've got
I
here.
haven't said that. I'm rejecting the language that's before us because there's another component here that I have a lot of aversion to.
Like what?
Because I've worked with the backside of the accounting of our MOUs that we've got 30 some odd at this point in time. And we're gonna lay another piece in here that says, oh, I'm over 18, so I'm due some money. Let's never mind the fact of all of the bookkeeping that we're laying inside of a system to track all of this stuff by center, by school, by classroom. Who's gonna audit it? Who's gonna track it? And who's gonna say, oh, well, at a point in time, you were getting money that you were used to, but maybe we reassign teachers for a certain reason. And then you lose the money and that's not going to be kosher. Or maybe a parent calls and says, I respectfully don't want my kid in that classroom any longer. And then you're at a situation. And then I've got to send, maybe it's an ESC situation where I've got to do a placement and I've got to put the kid in Stephanie's room. And at that point in time, you know, I just think there's so many variations on your 18, your hardline 18, your class size piece. I just think it's problematic. And that's why I've been very clear that we're just rejecting language. This was new language. This was not existing language that we're looking to tweak. And so I think I have the right in bargaining. We have the right to say, we reject your proposal.
But we just need
That's
to,
where we're at.
no, I understand. I get that. I just want clarification because because that's what you're speaking of is operational matters that we need to consider when putting language together. that I think we can bridge some of that.
I'm trying to
Hopefully
give
a lot
some
of it.
perspective and
Yeah.
some background
Right.
for the concerns, because I'm not just walking in and saying, oh, we're.
No,
we're
I get that.
yeah,
I get
we're
that.
done.
Brian, my only point was that if it's an operational matter, I think we can work on language to try and address some of that. Hopefully that'll be successful. But if it's a matter of principle, much I just simply don't believe it, then that's a different matter, right? Because it just simply means that no matter what language you put in front of you, it's always going to be no. So, but if I'm hearing you correctly,
Resolve this today. We're not going to go into it. You are hearing that I believe it is part of a job function that the teacher does, number one. But number two, there are some serious issues with how you're going to put this on the ground. You put this on the ground and it's like, it's class size, it's hard numbers, it's just, did you ever think about how we're gonna, we're taxing our IT systems as it is, to comply and to track and to be accurate. I can't even imagine the phone calls we're all gonna get relative to, I didn't get my pay, I didn't get my extra whatever, I've been over for this period of time, where's the money? And we're all chasing ourselves around and then by the time we chase ourselves around, we go to run a report out of the IT system and the numbers aren't even there anymore. And then it's like, okay, now what do we do? Well, I had those number of kids in my room for this number of days. Okay. I mean, just think about the logistics of what we're talking about. This is different than an MOU. This is different than doing it quarterly or by semester or by year. This is, I'm just saying, I'm refusing it. I don't know how we can put it on the ground. I don't know how we can do it.
So two things just before we leave this. So would it be helpful, and I'm asking you to maybe do some legwork on this too, while I do some on my own, for our team, because we have 3 districts that have some kind of version of this. Would it be helpful for you guys to reach out to how those districts do it? And then I can reach out to how on their side, how they handle it?
I would like to learn more.
Okay.
How they implement.
On the operational side of it. Because it was Brevard, Seminole, and Lake.
And I
And they
can't
do
even
different
say
versions of it.
if it would lay into a process that we can accommodate. Their contracts may look completely different. I would probably make the point that their contract is not as long as ours or extensive as ours, so they don't even have 110, 15,000 kids like they're dealing with. The sizes of those districts also have to be compared as well. We have over 163 school sites we're talking about. So
Yeah.
that's, I think that all has to be brought into focus, and we're trying to add staff to assist with getting paychecks right, to getting needs met for teachers as they need them across the whole system.
Okay.
I'm just trying to be mindful of
so we get that. So we're gonna hold on that language. Language is, in our opinion, that the ones that we currently have right. We're gonna hold on that language. We're gonna do some homework on your end, as homework on our end, to see how this similar language is implemented in these counties. Right? Because we're not on some of the stuff. This is language I think that if we have to parse out, if we have to redevelop, if we have to address operational, whatever we need to do, fine, let's just do it. But we can't just counter reject the entire thing and then that brings something to us. Because what we're trying to address, right?
I
By the way,
reject the whole thing
and in
because
terms of
it's new
taxing,
language.
and in terms of taxing, we also have to consider of taxing the teachers, right, and the students on that matter as well. So, but I'll leave it at that. Just I don't want to draw it out. So.
But I also want to put it back on the table that just because new language is dropped by your team doesn't mean that we have to just keep hammering it through until, this is some semblance of parsing out or getting what you want or needed. I think that's why existing language already clarified is so vital. This was new language. So don't walk away and think, if we don't get this pay for extra teachers in our classroom, we're not going to agree. That may be a difficult place for us because this was new language to start with.
So with existing language, then if just say on a day basis, I'm not talking about the class. If a principal says, okay, I'm gonna farm this class out to these 3 teachers today, under existing language, I could say, no, thank you.
That would be, you could try that. You could do that. It's in Article 6.1-5 if you wanted to go back and say that. 1-5 says a teacher may be requested but not required to substitute during his or her planning time.
That's
For the term. So I think we need to be clear about what the language is. And, Brandon, I said it last time. I'll say what I want to say. It's not going to be politically correct. We acknowledge that there is a class size that is a brick that's appropriate, right? But I've been in a school, you've been in a school to know that you get that roster of kids and that roster of kids changes. It's changing right now in your 15-day reviews. Some of you are striking kids that never showed up. Some of you are adding students that are still showing up. Okay. But at the end of the day, when I taught, I needed to make sure I had enough desks and enough books to accommodate what the AP or the principal was assigning in my classrooms. So I believe that it's a critical part. It's what we charge and pay teachers to do. But what is more, I'm going to say it again, to get to the level of what was proposed in this new language, there is a hybrid approach, in my opinion, to the philosophy and to the practice of what was presented. And I think at a point in time, we have to have conversations of practicality and function of what we're talking about. Because I am of the concern that the language that was presented is so specific that we will never dig out from under the daily operations of what happens with both for this many days off, this far over, this many days off, this far under, back and forth and trying to track that. I'm just happy if people can look on their staff portal and know exactly what their pay is. Okay. And so, yeah,
That's bad, you know that, right?
There's a lot of issues here. There's a lot of issues at play. I respect that other districts are doing it, but I'm not going to say they lay right into our practices or into our size or into our flow of work as well. Am I beyond reading about it and being interested in how they put it into practice? Yeah, I'd love to read it. I'm not averse to that or otherwise, but that's that.
I do want to say one thing, and I respect what you said about the fact that when you taught, we just dealt, but several things have happened since then, which is that there's a class size amendment, and yes, we could jury around it, but there is still a duly placed constitutional amendment that set an expectation for class size. And then again, some wiggle room happened. And the other thing that's different, Brian, is the fact that you weren't paid based upon the grades of your students. So it was a little bit different back in the day when your class was maybe 52 and you didn't end up having to worry about 52. You had steps. We paid everybody based upon the fact that they stayed, and it was more of that type of piece. So those things make a huge difference in how we do. And we have new teachers, and I've heard this, even though I'm, in a different place now, where people are claiming bait and switch. You promised me, I came to Florida thinking I'm going to have a reasonable class size, and I'm thinking I'm going to get this or that, and now I'm a class stuffed with 52 kids, and I'm going to get my pay based upon test scores and other things that, again, outside of our of Tallahassee, has pushed onto our plates. That becomes a problem, and so we're trying to solve a problem, at the table that is being generated from beyond maybe our control. And then they don't give us the money they're supposed to give us. We understand all that, but I think Wilfredo's point was just when we understand why, it helps us know where we might go or what we need to consider before we repropose or how we repropose.
I'd like to respectfully draw a parallel. I totally understand what you're talking about with all the systems in place, but you have to understand that from our side, what you see is placing 10 additional students in our classroom or 15 additional students in our classroom and having depth books for them. But that is not where our job ends. We are not collecting data for 5 or 10 or 15 more students per class period. So let's say reasonably 30 extra students. We are doing documentation for IEPs and 504 plans for ESC students and ESOL students for an additional 30 students. We are grading the work, a lot of which is mandated by the district. And I'm coming from an ELA perspective where I have to give 3 district mandated essays on top of my regular work. And when I go from 180 students to 216 students, that
That's
is
part of your job.
why
so you're saying.
I understand this. No, I've been trying to explain, like, you are correct in all of the systems that go into it. But your version, and no offense, I'm assuming it's been just a minute since you've been in the classroom, but the job has become and is continuing to become increasingly more complicated. Managing devices for an extra 30 students, managing logins and passwords for all of these different apps for an extra 30 students. Makeup work for an extra students. Last minute credit recovery. I mean, like, we're not talking about 10 more students in a classroom at any event. Like, that is in fact the part of it. It is all of these systems behind that are in place, then I now have that much more workload. So I respect your systems issue, but understand that it is a direct parallel to what teachers are having to deal with. And at a level, 30 more parents to come on before we can do anything about it if you want our classroom. So
I have a clarifying question. Based on what Brandon said, it sounded like I come to you and ask you, period. But based on what you're describing, it would be that the students are placed in your class
And then
we're not talking about planning. We're talking about a big thing.
we're talking about.
The straight to the question of my
Yeah.
Specific question on like a day-to-day basis.
Yes. And so we're talking about, because we can't hire, because they're not knocking down the doors, we can't fill vacancies. So to have children in front of highly qualified, certified instructors, you know, if there's 3 fourth grade teachers, but we need a 4th and nobody's hiring that 4th, we got to take those kids that should be in that 4th grade classroom. And now we either have a sub that's inconsistent or we split them.
Yeah, I understand. It just
Yeah.
sounded like I was making sure we were talking about one issue
Yeah.
rather than.
So that's why I want to get Article 6 on the table, so we could get it on the record that we could get it back to you.
Thank you.
So with that, we're at 1 o'clock. We got a hall, and I'll transition
Yes.
now.
Yes, please. So I know, we had put, based on the frameworks that we had worked through in the summer, either through subcommittee or, JD and I had sat down and looked at the teacher decompression over the summer. We had put together proposals and gave them to you guys on what that would look like for a 3-year decompression agreement, for salaries. I know, there were some cost out questions, and JD and I sat down yesterday, and worked through some of that so that we were doing the same thing, so we could compare apples to apples. We also had some questions on whether, where CDATs were paid, because that seemed to be really the sticking point in the para and the ESP contracts with the 5.7 million total. Where were CDATs paid out of? And a majority of our CDATs are paid out of federal dollars. They're not paid out of the general fund.
Right, JD did have a conversation.
Okay.
They expressed that they were unable to cover that increase with the grant.
The whole increase, because when I talked to Lori, she said she could probably absorb the 661,000.
I asked them if they thought they could take it in the maps.
Okay. Because she said she needed to talk to Carrie and see what they could absorb in the grant and for the grants now. Because that would alleviate, with the 93 center school pairs too being not paid out of the general fund, that's 152,000. Plus if the federal grants can absorb the 661,000, that's $800,000.
We need to look, long-term as well, because sometimes those grant amounts change.
Mm-hmm. So Do you have an official response on the proposals that we sent across the table? Or are we, what, I guess where are we at with that? And where do we go?
Do we want to summarize the responses and the discussions you all have for the team? The total cost, the amount.
I mean, we summarized what our total costs were last time. So I know JD was working on some cost outs yesterday to compare. So
What we're looking for is, what we're looking for, and tell us if you're not ready to do it, but we're looking for is an official response from our proposals. Then JD and Stephanie have worked things out. Are you gonna respond to the proposal we introduced last time we met?
or do you have any ideas?
Do you have any ideas? Yeah, so where are you? Because we,
Above the
of a counter.
we counter with the amount given to you as a base
Originally.
funding. You may work within that funding.
You so you're ordering us to work within the founding, the,
Feel free to.
okay, gotcha. I'm just,
That's all.
Have you done
Alright.
with that?
Let me, if I may, please, because the remark you made and the question you're posing and what you're asking for what's our counter proposal?
Or any ideas?
I think we need to be clear. Let me reframe this for us. When we came together, I'm gonna say 8 to 12 weeks ago, maybe even longer than that. I remember the meeting distinctly because the day we had the meeting, we were scheduled to be in the HR conference room, but the air was broken. I said, oh, let's go over to someplace else where the air is working. And we met in the superintendent's large conference room.
Yes.
It was on that day that we sat and we went through and we said, hey, here is our pots of money for the various groups. And we said at that point in time, $5.7 million is what we have. Go forth and prosper. Please develop your proposals. Figure out how much you go to teachers, parents, ESPs. But yet you're coming to us today with the proposal that you brought us last time that was over $4 million beyond the 5.7. And you're asking us, what is our counter proposal? We gave you the monies of 5.7. And your remark of, so you're just demanding us what to do, that's not accurate. No, you've got $5.7 million to please go back and reflect where and how you want to spend that and to affect and impact secretaries and paras and teachers. But we don't have 9.7 million to give you.
so at that meeting,
that money.
just to clarify, because I was part of that meeting. So at that meeting, right, we then said to you, once you said, this is the pot of money, right? We then responded, okay, we're gonna work only within that pot of money. That's it. Did we do that?
No, you did not.
Okay, just double checking. That's all it is. That's all I'm checking. By the way, and I wasn't being serious when I said that. I was being caught, but just want to make sure that wasn't said. All right.
We were
So
clearly $4 million over.
gotcha.
And I
So-
just want to go further
Yeah.
to say that we met as a team on about 3 different occasions and combed through the budget and looked to see what was the greatest amount of money that we could provide. We even made changes so that we could add more to that pot to divide up amongst the different groups. We have no interest in withholding funding. And we have put forth a good faith effort to give the entire amount that we can give to our employees and still maintain a positive fund balance. When you look at these things, you don't only look at the year that you're in, you have to look out at the next 2 or 3 years, because for every raise we give and every vacant position we have, as we fill those positions, which hopefully we will, that has the potential to add and then take away from the available funding. And with the volatility of funding that we have, you all know as well as we do that you can't guarantee what we're going to get at any given year.
So I guess my question was, because you have access to information and how to filter it than we do. And so our question was with the CDAT, when we put that out there with the potential change, we needed specific information that we were working on even yesterday, because the way it was costed out based on the data that we were given, what Jenna and JD were working on, they shared that spreadsheet with me. So we were all working off the same data. Is that the question is that the 5.7 total is out of the general fund? And so our questions were, if they're paid, which we know CDATs are paid out of federal funding, the question comes, sustain what X amount of dollars? And then what would the general fund have to, subsidize or not subsidize? Because that does make a huge impact. Because, and I'm going to throw this out there, if the grant can sustain the move, then that actually adds $661,000 to the 5.7 that we have to work with, which changes what we can do. And so I think that's where we're at right now, because we need to know both sides where we're at with that. We're under actually 5.7 if you don't move the CDAPs, right? But if we do move the CDAPs, and then if we're under, we need to go make tweaks too, because we're not leaving money on the table, right? And so those are questions that we need to have answered, because that does impact what we're able to do.
So we need to look closely at that, because in past years, using IDEA as an example, we've had to move parents from IDEA to the general fund because the amount of the grant has been reduced. So it's also a changing number. We can't always count on those numbers.
And we understand that, but those are questions that do impact that 5.7. And that was the question that we posed last time, saying, hey, this is over, but we also know that CDAPs are paid out of not general fund. Those were the questions that we needed answers to, because that does impact what we can do. If CDAPs can be fully funded out of the federal dollars, and the increase can be, then that actually brings a lot more money back that we can redistribute either with performance pay or into the pay schedule somewhere else. So those are the types of things that we needed answers to. And I even said when we presented it last time that yes, it looks like we're over, but we also have questions that need to be answered, because we may not be over, depending on how money can be moved around. And so that's really where we're at right now. And so we need to see where these CDAPs fall, if that grant can absorb it, or what percentage it can absorb, because then we're able to make better decisions based on that totality of money.
What was the total cost of your proposal? Did you see that? 60.
So if we kept them in PA07 and did the enhancements that we were doing, with the other schedules, it was $661,000. But that even brings us still under, we were at 5.2 million out of 5.7. And so we move them to PA10, then that's when you see the 2.6 million increase.
It's a $1.7 million
Yeah.
use to itself.
Yeah.
The ESP Para with benefits was a 5.2
Yes.
package.
Yes. And that's, but we needed to know those answers, because if we're not going to leave money on the table either. So if we have $500,000, if the CDATs can be completely absorbed, that actually brings more money back to that pot. So for example, if the Head Start VPK grants can absorb the increase, even if we left them at PA07, if the VPK federal grants can absorb the $661,000, that brings us almost $1 million back to the table that we could look at for performance pay, or we could look at, to look at salary schedule enhancements, other places, right? And so we're not trying to be obstinate about this, but there's also questions we need answers to as a team, both our team and your team, so that we can make educated decisions based on where this money is going. And we also put a 3-year deal across the table. And so with how to decompress these salary schedules. And so we really need to know where you're at on that concept. Because that's going to be very important moving forward, so that people know how these salaries are going to be decompressed.
It's hard for me to respond to a 3-year proposal being put across the table when I can't get past year 1 with the overages that we're discussing.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems trite to talk about years 2 and 3 when I can't even see my way through year 1 at this point in time. Because when we talk about years 2 and 3, you're going to hear all the things you've already heard. We do not know our FTEs from year to year. We don't know, fundings can change. We don't know what's going to happen. happening with the Work Empowerment Scholarship, you know, enrollment, there's all kind of variables. And you're asking, you know, for multi-year agreements on things we have a lot of unknowns for. We're in year one with trying to figure out, well, how within the 5.7 that we proposed. And I heard what you said about, oh, well, if we can find this much money here, we can talk about paper performance. I would agree, maybe on an annual basis for this year. And I also want to caution us as we talk about how positions are funded and how we're paying for those salaries, because that's not to say those grant funds are going to be around multi-years or always be there to give us the support that we're talking about.
Well, federal Head Start and pay are
We have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. But I will say, out of the actual decompression of the salary schedules, we are well within the TSIA budget and the 5.7. The two things that have put us over that we needed questions on were the CDAT move from PA 7 to PA 10. That's the one thing in the support staff contracts that we're asking to look at to see what we can do with that. And then the second thing was the performance pay, right? And so that's outside of the decompression of the salary schedule. So I will, for the record, say compression, if you take out the move of the CDATs just for a second, and you take out performance pay that we had proposed in a supplement, we are well within what is budgeted.
That's about $4 million. Check.
But I'm saying, if you take the performance pay, because that's separate than the decompression of the salary schedule of moving people down to get them out of that base and move everybody down.
That was a rough cost of $2 million.
Yes. And then if you take the CDAT move, right, because that's the hang up in the para contract and the support staff pot of money that we're using. So those two things, outside of that, the actual salary agreement, just the decompression, is well within budget. And we needed answers to those questions to make educated decisions on, do we move CDAT to PA 10 or what, can we do something different? Those are the things that we need answers on. But just in and of itself, the decompression models for 23, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26, those are well within what we're currently budgeted. And so the only two pieces that are outside of that are the performance pay and the CDAP. So just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
I don't know. As of right now, they told me they can't take on any of what I told them.
So we'd have to wait for additional, I'm confused though. So if it's 1.7 over the 660, were you saying that the total amount for this net increase was 660?
If we kept them in PA 7 with the way it was presented, the increase would be 661,000.
They wouldn't be increased with 10, they would just have the increase on the grid.
So I presented two scenarios in that grid. I presented if they stayed in PA 7, I costed it out that it would be 661,000, which is within our budget or the allocation that we had. But if we, based on the job description review committee, if we were going to move them to PA 10, that's what it would cost. And we were looking at, can the grant, sustain it? Those were the questions that we needed answers to. Because then that helps us make informed decisions on, is that doable? Do we do something else, etc.
What is the The CDATs, the 7 to the 10, that's the, one of the first standpoints, because it's a 1.7 on your two proposals, it's 660 versus the 1.7.
The change is 1.7
Right.
if we were to move them to PA10. I
I know we've done preliminary work behind the scenes, and I know that we've got recommendations, that's why we're at 7 versus 10.
Yeah.
But it would appear to be direct, that's not something we can afford at this point in time.
Only not paid out of the general fund and the grant could sustain it, then that actually frees up money out of the allocation that we have. And so those were all questions we needed to be able to make informed decisions on where to go.
So then we'll put a pin in that, because I've been hearing, I know you and JD have worked, and I know our staff has been reaching out to federal programs for input as well. Pay for performance, that's a $2 million price tag. Remember, we were like 5.2 ESP parent with benefits. So, we're still, and you're asking for what our counter is. I need some collaborate. I need you to think about that too, because it's like, okay, so we're going to have to shave and evaluate this somewhere somehow, because clearly that's another big chunk.
So definitely to see that as a hypo. This is straight up. This is talking. See that and the pay performance. We're within the
We're actually have $500,000 to still play with.
we're within the bucket or the bag. This discussion hypothetical, not proposing anything, but after this and then the pay performance, the proposal is within the bucket that Brian was talking about earlier, with an extra half.
We have about $500,000, 5.2 to 5.5.
Would be your pay for performance.
Well, that would be a quarter of the pay for performance. 500,000. But that's why we needed answers to those, because we also need to be able to make an educated, informed decision on where to go. And so, and I will offer, I think every other district around us is doing something for pay for performance this year. And so we need to be cognizant of that, since we touched another county. And so we need to make sure that we've let pay for performance go by the wayside for the last couple of years as we've moved to 47.5 with the restrictions under the law. But we need to start really thinking about how we work pay for performance back in, because other districts that touch us are going to start coaching teachers that pay better for pay for performance. And so we do need to think about that.
I hear you. There are competing priorities. We know that. So, if the focus is on pay for performance, then we got to go back and reevaluate those grids and then values that were built into those proposals of ESP and para. Because if the teacher pay for performance of 2 million is the priority, then we're going to have to go lead that from somewhere. And that's where I started with this process. Is it's like you're engaging with us wanting, and we can give you the data, but at the end of the day, I know it has been a philosophy or a concept of here's a chunk of money, you guys work and figure out where your priorities and what you want to do. We just go from there. So I'm a little bit, I feel like I'm over the line of where I want to be, making those remarks, because I wanted you to make those considerations and bring them back to us.
Well, we need more information, I guess is what we're saying, is because it does make an impact on decision making, because it knowing what can be absorbed and what can't, I mean, that does impact the 5.7.
Back to Wilfredo's summary. So we need more information on the CDATs absolutely being
What can be absorbed?
committed to, what can we absorb or not absorb under those federal programs on
Mhm.
L'Oreal or otherwise. And I don't know what to say about the teacher pay for performance. To see that probably is your linchpin that drives the next discussion.
Yeah, and that's why we need to know that, because that does impact how we go forward. Because depending on what can be absorbed or what can't be, then that informs our decision going forward with this. Do we know, JD, when, I mean, like the bottom line, like of what they actually can absorb?
They haven't responded.
I mean, forget.
I'll try to get back to you.
You want me to call them? They seem to answer when I call.
We called them yesterday in meetings and I emailed it. They answered the first time saying they can't do the 2.6 and then said nothing else to be done. Well, that's good. How much? It's like, what's the amount?
Well, to your remark, I just can't let that go relative to
What did I say?
well, I think your remark was point blank. They seem to answer when I call.
Oh, yeah. That's what
So,
being recorded.
It may be that they pick up the phone and you get lucky when you call, but it may be that they're also in a meeting. And furthermore, for the information that you're going to request, they're going to have to come back up the chain and do research on this kind of stuff too.
Well, Brian, we've been at this for a while.
You know, put a value or.
I get that, Brian. Stephanie and JD get together and they go over these numbers, your numbers again and again and again and again. Then, once they have their all day long meeting, it gets reported back to the office. We think we're there. And then we come here to discuss, to listen to what your thoughts are on the salary proposal, any ideas, any creativity, anything at all. And all we get is essentially silence is what we get. Input to it at all. So we at least try to ask questions. Okay, tell me what you want to head with this. What do you say? This is our priority. Where do you want to go with it? Right? It's frustrating that we have these offsite committee meetings. We meet again and again and again. We review these numbers, and we're asking basic questions that should have been asked at the committee level, these subcommittees. No, I get that. I understand it's not an agreement, but this is if we need information and we're not going to be sitting down negotiations, someone must have the ability to pick the phone up and call them up and say, look, we really need this information. We're about to sit down with the union to discuss salaries and we really need this information. We don't have to delay this again for another meeting down the road to discuss something that we should have had by now. That's what I'm saying. And this happens again and again, where we have subcommittees, we seem to have a conversation, we seem to have some clarity, but then when we sit down at the negotiating table, it doesn't, you're coming, we don't know where you're going, what you're saying, what you're doing, what you're thinking, because you're not sharing with us. You know, that's why I keep asking the same question. Are you rejecting this proposal based on principle? Why? Because it helps inform us whether or not it's worthy to make the proposal or is worthy to stick to the proposal. Are you rejecting this proposal because operational reasons, because of that funding, because then it informs us on how we put our proposal together. It just seems that some of these things get delayed unnecessarily. So sometimes I'm a little bit coy, sometimes a little bit wise guy about it, but it's just frustrating to not have some basic fundamentals at the table.
May I understand your frustration. I think what basically is being addressed is that there's a difference between constructive and purposeful.
Don't lecture me. Do not lecture me. Don't.
I did not interrupt.
Do not lecture me. I ain't gonna interrupt you. This is the second time. Don't you dare lecture me. This is the second time. This is the second time you've done this. This is the second time you've done this.
I did not raise my voice.
Do not lecture me on how to comport myself.
I did not.
Do not lecture me
to your team member.
Do not lecture me.
And I'm going to finish my statement. What I am saying is there's a difference between construct remarks. My question is, what is the purpose of some of the extra remarks? You just said to Mr. Warren, you ask questions, you're trying to understand, you don't have information. My question is, what is the purpose of the extra remarks? Is it constructive? Is it taking us to a place that we're not? Is it giving it more information? Is it requesting more information? So I think what we're saying is, what is the purpose of those extra remarks? And I'm going to go on record now. This is the second or third time that you've raised your voice to me and that you have acted and engaged in an uncivil manner. All I'm saying, collectively bargaining, we are doing that in good faith. Does that add to the good faith? What constructive result do we have?
My remarks.
I did not
My
finish
remarks go to
statement.
being better prepared.
I did not
This is the
finish
third
my
time.
statement.
This is the third
Mrs.
time.
Yoakum,
Let's
and
caucus
I did
for a
not,
minute.
I did not
that you
interrupt.
try to lecture me.
Let's
I did
caucus
not
for a minute.
interrupt, Ms.
Yeah.
Yoakum.
Let's caucus for a minute. Let's stop for a minute.
I could report that at 1:30. I think we need space, we need time.
Okay.
We know that our numbers aren't matching.
Mhm.
We know that we're at a value over the 5.7. And,
Well, and we're over 5.7 because we do need information on the CDAP. Because that does inform how we move forward. And so if we can get that very quickly,
we'll get the funding and we'll get the numbers and options on the CDATs alone. Because I'm thinking that's the linchpin for you to begin to make evaluations of, okay,
yes,
where's our larger discussions next?
yes.
We can go there next.
Thank you.
That's 1.7, that's the 7 versus 10.
Yeah.
It's the 660 versus
Yes.
the 1.7.
Yes.
We'll go from there, okay?
And just before that, I think it's a good idea to probably stop at this point.
Let's go ahead.
We've got Laura, you're going to mirror over the para and ESP unpaid leaves.
Mhm.
Okay. Para 14, insurance clarification from what we signed today.
And then I'm gonna give you another 20, Article 20. On that teacher one, from where we started today.
Oh, okay, okay.
More time for that, but I.
No, yeah. No, that's fine. So para 19 ESP 15 salary compensation. You're bringing back association rights.
Oh, that was 6.
It has 9.6 on it, para ESP. I thought we were,
I don't think we got to that, but yeah.
okay. We need to still talk about para ESP,
I've got.
appendix C.
I'm sorry, ESP4 ready. We can do that another time.
Yes, I think
It's
that's probably
mirroring
best.
teacher language from last year.
All right, then we'll continue to work through this agenda. We'll get calendar dates when we come back with ASME.